In the shadows of America's greatest city, two men rose to unimaginable power, only to turn against each other in a war for supremacy. Frank Costello, the gentleman gangster who mastered the art of political influence, and Vito Genovese, the ruthless tactician who stopped at nothing to claim the throne of the underworld. Together they defined an era of organized crime, but their rivalry would tear the Mafia apart and reshape its future forever. Health Wealth Diary presents to you the true story behind the movie The Alto Knights, a tale of jealousy, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of power. Frank Costello was born Francesco Castiglia in 1891 in Calabria, Italy. At the age of 4, he and his family immigrated to New York City, settling in East Harlem. Like many immigrant families, the Castiglias struggled to make ends meet, and young Francesco quickly found himself drawn into the local street gangs. By his teenage years, Costello had already developed a reputation as a smooth talker and a natural leader. While other gangsters relied on brute force, Costello understood the value of relationships. He soon became part of the Morello crime family, where he began dabbling in bootlegging during Prohibition. Unlike many mobsters of his time, Costello believed violence was bad for business. He focused on making connections with politicians and law enforcement, creating a network of influence that made him nearly untouchable. By the 1930s, he had risen to become the right-hand man of Lucky Luciano, helping to establish the Mafia Commission, a governing body for organized crime in America. Costello's brilliance wasn't just in making money, it was in how he used it. He bribed judges, funded political campaigns, and controlled labor unions, earning him the nickname the Prime Minister of the Underworld. By the 1940s, he was one of the most powerful men in America, running a vast gambling empire and influencing decisions at the highest levels of government. But while Costello projected an image of respectability, his power came at a cost. Behind the scenes, his closest ally, Vito Genovese, was quietly plotting his downfall. Born in 1897 in Naples, Italy, Vito Genovese immigrated to the United States in 1913, settling in Little Italy. From a young age, Genovese was drawn to the violent world of organized crime. Unlike Costello, who preferred diplomacy, Genovese believed in the power of fear and intimidation. By the 1920s, Genovese was working alongside Charles Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello, helping to overthrow the old Mafia bosses during the bloody Castellamarese War. Genovese proved himself a loyal enforcer, but his ambitions went far beyond being a second-in-command. After Lucky Luciano was convicted in 1936 on prostitution charges, Genovese, who'd been Luciano's underboss, took over as acting Don. While Costello focused on expanding his influence, Genovese had his sights set on the throne. In 1937, he fled to Italy to avoid a murder charge, where he aligned himself with Benito Mussolini's fascist regime, smuggling drugs and looted treasures during World War II. These events put Costello in charge of the Luciano crime family, a development that Genovese did not easily accept. When Genovese returned to the U.S. in 1945, he found Costello at the height of his power. But instead of reuniting with his old ally, Genovese began building his own faction within the Mafia, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By the mid-1950s, the tension between Costello and Genovese was at a breaking point. Costello represented the old guard, relying on diplomacy and connections. Genovese, however, wanted absolute control of the Mafia and believed Costello was standing in his way. On May 2, 1957, Genovese made his move. Costello was ambushed in the lobby of his Manhattan apartment building by a gunman named Vincent the Chin Gigante. A single shot was fired. Vincent the Chin Gigante was born on March 29, 1928 in Greenwich Village, Manhattan, to Italian immigrant parents. Growing up in a working-class family, Gigante became involved in petty crimes as a teenager, which eventually brought him into the orbit of Genovese. In the 1950s, Gigante became one of Genovese's trusted enforcers and was groomed for leadership, paving the way for his rise in organized crime and future boss of the family. Miraculously, the bullet from Gigante's gun grazed Costello's head, and he survived. But the message was clear. Genovese wanted him gone. Knowing he couldn't fight back, Costello retired, effectively handing over control of the Mafia to Genovese. By the fall of that year, in a bid to take over the Mafia's governing body known as the Commission, Genovese conspired on another murder, this one with New York crime boss Albert Anastasia. During a surprise attack, Anastasia was shot to death while seated in a barber's chair at a Manhattan hotel. With Costello out of the picture, Genovese became the most powerful mob boss in New York. He ruled with an iron fist, expanding his control over drug trafficking and eliminating anyone who stood in his way. Meanwhile, Frank Costello lived quietly in retirement. Though he had lost his empire, he managed to avoid prison and live out his days in peace, a rare feat in the violent world of the Mafia. In 1959, Genovese was betrayed by his own men during a narcotic sting operation. He was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison for heroin trafficking. A decade later, locked in a Missouri federal prison, Genovese died of a heart attack at age 71. The crime family that Genovese took over by force and intimidation has continued to bear his name. It is one of the Mafia 5 families still operating in New York City. Costello was still a very respected figure by other mafioso in his later life and remained close to associates such as Meyer Lansky. Frank Costello died of natural causes in 1973. He was 82 years old. While Costello had lost his empire, he avoided the violent end that claimed so many others in his world. The story of the Alto Knights is one of ambition, loyalty, and betrayal. Costello and Genovese represented two sides of the Mafia: diplomacy and violence, tradition and ambition. Their rivalry marked the beginning of the end for organized crime as it once existed. But their story isn't just about the Mafia. It's about the human thirst for power and the lengths we'll go to achieve it, no matter the cost. What do you think? Was Costello's diplomacy smarter, or did Genovese's ambition make him the real leader? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to the Health Wealth Diary.